Among the constellation of Roman emperors whose names are steeped in legend and sometimes infamy, one figure stands out, whose story, despite its striking unusualness, remains less known to the broader public. This is Elagabalus, one of the most intriguing and truly unique characters ever to sit on the imperial throne. While his name may not resonate as loudly as, for example, Caligula or Nero, his reputation for unbridled luxury and unparalleled debauchery stands alongside theirs, captivating the imagination with its exceptional audacity. Prepare to learn about a ruler who defied all notions of power and identity, for he was not merely an emperor, but a transgender teenager who ascended to the pinnacle of global power. The official name under which this young man ascended the throne was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. This was not a mere coincidence, but a carefully calculated move designed to bolster his highly questionable, if not outright false, claim of direct blood relation to such distinguished predecessors as Caracalla and Marcus Aurelius himself. However, despite this attempt at legitimization through a connection to celebrated dynasties, history remembers the youth from Syrian Emesa by a different name entirely, the Latinized form of his patron deity's name, Elagabalus. It is by this name that he entered the annals of history, and it is under this name that his fate will be further revealed. Elagabalus's path to the throne was paved through a bloody drama that unfolded on April 8, 217 CE. On that fateful day, Emperor Caracalla fell at the hands of his own soldiers, acting at the instigation of one of his praetorian prefects, Macrinus. Caracalla's death, leaving no male heir, instantly opened the door to a fierce power struggle, leaving the question of succession to the imperial throne a gaping and dangerous void. This state of uncertainty, however, did not last long. Just a few days after the assassination, Macrinus, as the instigator of the conspiracy, was hastily proclaimed the new emperor. But Macrinus's reign proved short-lived and largely ineffective, foreshadowing his swift downfall. The main reason for his weakness was his extremely difficult, if not hostile, relationship with the Roman army. The soldiers, whose loyalty to the Severan dynasty was fanatical and unwavering, could not reconcile themselves to the ascent of a usurper. Moreover, Macrinus concluded the protracted conflict with the Parthian Empire, which Caracalla had initiated, on terms that were highly unfavorable to Rome. This decision was dictated not only by the increasing pressure from discontented soldiers but also by Macrinus's fatal lack of military experience, which would have allowed him to conduct an effective and victorious campaign against the Parthians. Such a combination of factors created the ideal ground for the emergence of a new, unexpected figure on the political stage, whose reign was destined to transcend all conceivable notions of norms and traditions. Julia Misa, sister of Julia Domna and aunt to Emperor Caracalla, took decisive action by relaying highly provocative information to the soldiers. She claimed that Caracalla had engaged in intimate relations with her daughters and, moreover, that one of her own sons, Elagabalus, was in fact the illegitimate offspring of the deceased emperor. Simultaneously with these declarations, a rumor rapidly spread that this venerable lady was prepared to generously reward the soldiers with her immense wealth if they helped restore her family to power. And so, on May 16, 218 CE, the soldiers of the 3rd Gallic Legion, swayed by these promises and intrigues, proclaimed the 14-year-old Elagabalus the new emperor of Rome. According to the accounts of Cassius Dio, it was the guardian of young Elagabalus, a certain adoptive father, who acted as the primary instigator of this revolt. In any case, it is evident that the rebellion received significant support from both influential local elites in Emesa and the aforementioned military units. Soon after these events, Elagabalus's forces met Macrinus's army in a decisive battle near Antioch in Syria. Initially, the battle unfolded with fluctuating success, and the forces were roughly equal until Macrinus suddenly lost his composure and fled the battlefield. He managed to reach Asia Minor, but his pursuit did not cease. A centurion dispatched on his trail caught up with the fugitive and ruthlessly decapitated him, thereby clearing the path for Elagabalus. Thus, the 14-year-old Elagabalus became the youngest sole emperor of Rome at that historical moment. Both of our key ancient sources, Herodian and Cassius Dio, mention in their works the story that Elagabalus was allegedly Caracalla's illegitimate son. While modern historians almost certainly deem this claim false, for the legitimization of the young emperor in the eyes of his subjects and the army, this story was of paramount importance. Before his ascent to the imperial throne, Elagabalus's primary activity involved serving as the chief priest of the Emerson cult of the god Elagabalus, who was worshipped in the form of an unworked, sacred stone. Clearly, such a religious position did not, in itself, constitute a sufficiently strong claim to the Roman imperial throne. Despite the fact that Roman religious practice traditionally showed a willingness to assimilate new deities, a significant portion of ancient accounts concerning this emperor's reign focuses on the exceptional exoticism of his cult and the blatant unconventionality of his personal behavior. For instance, it is reported that even before his arrival in Rome, he sent ahead a monumental painting depicting himself in his opulent, non-Roman attire, so as not to cause immediate shock among the citizens of Rome upon his unexpected appearance. Herodian, a renowned historian, elaborately describes the deep concern of Julia Maesa, who repeatedly and persistently tried to persuade the young ruler to don a traditional Roman toga before he entered the city for a visit to the Senate. She feared that his distinctly foreign and utterly unacceptable, barbarian, appearance would offend those who saw him. The inhabitants of the capital were completely unaccustomed to such garments and perceived his lavish adornments as something exclusively appropriate for women. Upon arriving in Rome, he daily performed elaborate rites in honor of his deity Elagabalus, sacrificing entire hecatombs to the deafening clang of cymbals and rhythmic drumbeats, creating an atmosphere alien to Roman piety. He himself, as well as his accompanying female retinue, dressed in Phoenician attire, and moreover, he demanded that high-ranking political and military officials wear similar garments and personally carry the entrails of sacrificed animals in exquisite golden bowls. Such actions, of course, only intensified the Senate's profound contempt for their new emperor. Elagabalus seemed unshakably confident that the Senate would enthusiastically embrace the new sun god, yet it never occurred to him that Roman senators would feel deep aversion towards him precisely because of his persistent imposition of a local Syrian cult. In an attempt to curb the young ruler's eccentricities, his mother arranged a marriage for him with a high-ranking Roman woman. However, this candidate was rejected, as Elagabalus chose to forcibly marry a Vestal virgin, which became yet another egregious defiance of ancient Roman society's norms and sacred traditions. During his brief 4-year reign, the emperor married a total of 5 times, twice to the same person. Notably, in 220 CE, Elagabalus was appointed to the high office of consul. His co-consul was a freedman and former mime named Valerius Camazon. It was this freedman who subsequently managed to concentrate significant imperial power in his hands, while Elagabalus himself was wholly absorbed in the performance of his exotic cult and lavish feasts. As attested by Cassius Dio, the distinguished historian and contemporary of Elagabalus, the emperor's mother, Julia Soaemias, was deeply concerned that her son's exotic attire might be interpreted as effeminate by certain segments of Roman society, especially the military contingents. His mother was well aware of the strategic importance of the legion's support, understanding that losing the army's favor would be disastrous for him. Cassius Dio also reports that Elagabalus's unusual wardrobe choice was not accidental but was partly dictated by his profound desire not to be a man at all. The historian goes further in his assertions, stating that Elagabalus sought to go beyond the circumcision prescribed by his cult and was willing to undergo emasculation if only he could find a physician capable of creating female genitalia for him. And among other accounts of his numerous marriages, there is the assertion that he sometimes played the role of wife rather than husband in these unions. By 221 CE, as historical chronicles attest, the young emperor's grandmother and mother seemed to have completely lost the ability to restrain his unpredictable antics. The only acceptable solution they could persuade him to adopt was the elevation of his younger cousin to the rank of co-emperor on the imperial throne. Thus, in late June 221 CE, Julia Mamaea's son was officially adopted, taking the name Marcus Aurelius Alexander. Despite Elagabalus being only a few years older than his cousin, the Roman Senate, well aware of the absurdity and incongruity of the situation, nevertheless ratified the adoption. Soon after, Elagabalus appointed himself and his newly minted co-ruler as joint ordinary consuls for the upcoming year 222, and also bestowed upon Alexander the honorary title of Caesar. However, the relationship between the two cousins evidently remained very strained. Various military units, it is reported, were extremely concerned about whether the cousins would find common ground, undoubtedly remembering Caracalla's tragic murder of Geta just a decade earlier. Herodian, the renowned historian, testifies that the Praetorian Guard was outraged watching an emperor whose face was painted with more meticulous care than any modest woman's, dancing in lavish robes and delicately adorned with golden necklaces. Towards Alexander, however, they harbored much greater sympathy, placing immense hopes on a youth who had been so appropriately and discreetly raised. They constantly and closely monitored the young man's every move. There was a palpable sense in the air that Elagabalus harbored ill intentions against his cousin. Alexander's mother, recognizing this threat, vigilantly oversaw her son's safety, strictly forbidding him from touching any food or drink that might have been sent by the emperor. Moreover, Alexander himself avoided using the services of palace cupbearers or cooks. Only those meticulously selected by his mother and proven to be the most reliable among the general staff were granted access to prepare and serve food for Alexander. Gradually, as the relationship between the Augustus and the Caesar, that is, between Elagabalus and Alexander, steadily deteriorated, historical evidence points to at least 2 conspiracies organized by Elagabalus with the aim of eliminating his younger cousin. On one such tense day, March 11, 222 CE, when Alexander unexpectedly ceased to appear in public, the Praetorian Guard became alarmed. The soldiers, fearing that Elagabalus might have harmed his relative, mutinied. Alexander hastened to the Praetorian camp, seeking to calm the unrest, but was forcibly detained. He remained under guard until his mother, Julia Soaemias, arrived. Their joint public appearance provoked a powerful surge of long-suppressed emotions and indignation. In the ensuing unbridled fury, Elagabalus, his mother, the prefect of the guard, and several other high-ranking officials were brutally murdered, and the emperor's lifeless body was subjected to desecration before being cast into the waters of the Tiber. The still very young Alexander, barely past the threshold of adolescence, was enthroned and proclaimed the sole ruler of the vast Roman Empire, taking the majestic name Marcus Aurelius Severus Alexander. This event was followed by the systematic eradication of any mention of Elagabalus. His memory was deliberately erased from all public records, and numerous images, including even a monumental life-size statue of Hercules, now housed in Naples, were reworked to feature a new face, the likeness of young Alexander. For centuries, Elagabalus's image has remained a bizarre blend of historical reality and artistic fiction. Countless layers of perceptions, enveloping his true historical core and formed in distant antiquity, have significantly obscured our understanding of this extraordinary 3rd-century Roman emperor. Inevitably, the question arises, where does the invisible line lie between historical reality and the wild flight of human imagination? Nevertheless, one thing appears absolutely clear: his main goal was to elevate a distinctly foreign deity to the pinnacle of the Roman pantheon, which would have been an unprecedented challenge to traditional norms. However, stepping away from the religious sphere, his reign in most other aspects was characterized more by the preservation of the existing order and continuity than by radical transformations. The empire in those years still enjoyed relative peace and demonstrated a certain stability, although this era of peace would begin to inexorably unravel during Severus Alexander's reign with the first serious Persian invasions. This state of affairs also strongly testifies to the enduring functionality and high level of competence of Rome's administrative apparatus, which continued to operate effectively despite the fact that rulers not distinguished by particular foresight or administrative talent had occupied the throne in recent years. Consequently, extreme caution must be exercised not to attach excessive importance or exceptional status to the period of 218 to 222 CE within the vast and multifaceted context of all Roman imperial history.